Hello, everybody. I am Kristen, aka Like Water. I'm super excited to be here with you all. Today's in session is focused on creating multiple streams of income, and I'm beyond excited to be joined by our panelists, Treya Lam and Shawn Smallwood.
Hey everybody, how's it going?
Hi,
Hey,
everyone.
y'all. So let's get started with you, Treya. Can you share with everyone your preferred gender pronouns and a little bit about yourself?
Sure, my pronouns are they, them, and I am a multi-instrumentalist and songwriter based out of New York. Um, I have my own solo project that morphs in terms of musicians, and I'm also a part of a group called the Resistance Revival Chorus.
Incredible. So grateful to have you, Treya. Sean, can you share a bit about yourself and your preferred gender pronouns?
Uh, I use it a lot,
Love it.
or
Love it.
they or we. Which no, I don't know. I get misgendered a lot actually. I'm often people are like hello ladies. So these days I just kind of go with the water, the flow of the water. It's
Awesome.
all flow. But no, it's also once you become an artist, you become an entity or a business, not necessarily a person. So I do use it a lot in conversation when people talk about it because it's kind of like dropping off a speaker, or it's at a turntable sometimes, not necessarily dropping off a human being.
I feel you. You want to tell the audience a little bit about who you are or what you do? Or...
Oh, yeah. So, hey, everybody, I'm Sean. I am a music producer, a multi instrumentalist. Yeah. I DJ. I play music. I don't know. There's a wide ranging array of work that can be done, and I try to. I don't know. It's all those things end up being like jobs. There are things that you do. Whether you're you say I'm a drummer, people like you just play drums. No, sometimes I might just be reheading drums for another drummer. That's also a job. That's also a job that can pay you. So, uh, yeah, no, I work I am based in Miami, Florida. I'm from Baltimore, Maryland. Uh, I work for IK Multimedia these days. We make the iRig, which is a terrible way to present this, but how I'm able to have my microphone connected now, and so that actually chains into a little bit, I guess, of what as far as like diversity of income, diversity and things of that nature. But yeah, I hope that covered it.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to dive into the amazingness that is these two folks that are multifaceted beings. So, super excited to jump into this with you all. So, it is a super dope panel. And a bit before we dive in, we're going to be covering a bunch of topics related to income for musicians for the first 45 minutes of the discussion. And then we're going to leave some time for you all, the audience, to drop in the Q&A any questions that you have, anything that arises as we discuss. If you guys have any questions or things that you want to know. So, a few housekeeping items we're going to cover. This is a supportive and uplifting space, so we want to keep that in mind as we get into the discussion, as we are in the chat, in the Q&A, all of those things. Also, please feel free to drop in the chat and let us know where you're tuning in from. Feel free to show your support in any of the topics that we're talking about or how it is impacting you. But when you are in the chat, please change the little blue box from panelists to panelists and attendees so we can all be a part of the conversation. And then, like I said, if you have any questions, instead of putting it in the chat because it can get lost in all of the beautiful comments that come through, we're going to use the Q&A function, which is at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So you can just click the Q&A function, type in any questions that you have. You can send it any way you'd like, and then we will jump into those in the last 15 minutes of the session. And then also, last but not least, you should receive a survey after the session, just asking you how did you enjoy it and asking if you have any other topics that you want us to cover and to shed light on for any future in sessions. So my whole spiel is over. We're going to dive into why we are here, creating multiple streams of income for the indie musician or musicians in general. So I'm going to jump right into it. What are your main sources of income? We can start with you, Treya. What are your main sources of income right now?
So I'm going to be completely transparent. I had just made, excuse me, I just made I had just quit my day job in February 2020,
Wow.
uh, right
Congratulations.
before the pandemic hit. So in the past year or so, I would say that I've been kept afloat by random, various like freelance jobs, but also collecting unemployment. But prior to that, I was making most of my income as a hospitality worker. And, but music wise, the majority of my income comes from live performance.
Grateful that that is beginning to shift, because I'm sure that yeah, like a lot of artists just took a toll for sure. Um Sean, what are your main streams of income these days?
Well, these days, my main source of income is the corporate job within music, which I have been able to acquire because of the pandemic. This particular company saw an unprecedented amount of growth due to everyone staying at home, not only musicians, but educators and politicians and medical professionals. This was a wide ranging group of people. So uh, that was a pivot point. But there's all I know that there's always like a potential end game as well. Because I'm getting a little bit older, and nobody wants to see a 50-year-old man jumping around on stage playing music to 15-year-olds.
I mean, I'm down to see that
Well,
happen.
but that's also we're from Baltimore. We have a gentleman there named Wayne Davis. Mr. Davis has been DJing since the early '70s, late '70s. He's one of the first DJs in the region. And so he owned the Paradox as well as several other legendary nightclubs within Baltimore, and he still plays out. Like you won't see Mr. Davis play until like 6 or 7 in the morning. And he's been awake all night. So it's been very inspirational in terms of DJing. I've been able to. I actually haven't lost that much performance income. A lot of my clients transitioned over to streaming events, and our previous experience in that field, in that arena, helped and that was kind of even how I got a job. I like in March of 2020, my friends were like, Sean, how do we play music on the internet? And I was like, okay, we need this thing. You have to go to this place. And I was like, this company sells it. They've sold it for years. Everybody be fine, plug it in. And when I did that, I happened to know that they had a career section at the bottom of their website. So I pressed it. And they're like 15 minutes away from the beach that I'm like sitting across the street from right now.
Wow.
So I've been trying to tell that story as much as possible to young people as well. Because it's a lot of people do think that you just have to be on stage. And I'm like, you can just go get a job, work, like look around your house, look at the instruments that you own, see if those companies are hiring, and or even if you get in on the ground floor, get an entry level job, that's a great way to supplement your income. But yeah, no, I've just been streaming and working.
Yeah, that is definitely the name of the game. Trying to find that balance, which is really why we're all here. And I know that the pandemic definitely had a huge impact on the different streams that artists had coming in previously, and had to kind of shift, like you said, to virtual spaces to really figure out how to continue to do what they love, and also feed themselves and their family, or whatever other responsibilities that they may have. So you can let me know, like, what inspired you to kind of diversify that, or to create multiple streams of income. And you can speak from pre-pandemic, now, during it. You can, whatever lens you want to look through, or multiple ones. But what was that inspiration behind it?
Uh, I think so much of who I am is a multifaceted being, and so it's always been difficult to try to. It felt really suffocating and limiting to just have one path. I think as a human, I just want to explore the entire spectrum of what is possible in my my experience. So that translated to how I practice music as work, and like as a multi-instrumentalist, like playing different instruments, it gives me the ability to not only build my own project, but support different artists in a variety of ways. And that is kind of the start of how I got into looking into multiple streams of income. It just makes
Yeah,
sense for who I am.
I love that. Yeah, definitely understand that feeling of suffocation, or like the understanding or the idea that one person has to do one thing forever, or not forever, but you can only do one thing at a time. And you're like, well, actually, I love designing clothes, and I actually also love playing the drums, and I also love, all of these things. So that feeling is really real of like, no, I can make my own rules and do what I want to do simultaneously or not. So absolutely huge inspiration. What about you, Shawn?
It's I guess I'll backtrack a little bit. You both talked about being multi-instrumentalist, and when I first started playing music a few years ago, I just wanted to play guitar. That was like my favorite instrument, still is my favorite instrument. But I remember meeting a guy, and he was like, you're not bad at playing guitar, so you're learning it. However, if you want to make money, learn how to play the drums. Every band needs a drummer. And it was that mentality that was, I was like, oh, okay, you're not just doing one thing, in this industry. If you want to sustain yourself, uh, you have to, do multiple jobs. And that over the last 20 years, I've seen that shift greatly. As jobs like photography and videography and music, sound engineering, those all used to be individual jobs, and now they just kind of lump them all together as content creation, and they expect you to be able to produce all of this content kind of at the drop of a hat. uh, Another part of it, I guess, as we continue to go backwards and forwards, I then started to DJ out more and throwing parties for people, in the impression that, okay, we charge X amount of dollars, but the reality is, like, we never made any money. We would end up spending way more money either in equipment or in bringing in talent from out of town and housing them, and making sure that they could get back home. So you end up not making a ton of money in doing only performances. You end up having to figure out ways to hit your bottom line, whatever that may be. If that's just rent and gas and electric, well, we got to figure out how are we going to bring in, that amount of money. And so that might be record sales, that might be touring, that might be merch sales, but it is about figuring out those multiple sources of income.
Absolutely. And I love that journey because, we all have something that we love, and then someone comes along and they're like, actually, you might want to think about this. And sometimes, it's not all about the money. Sometimes it's about what brings you joy and what speaks to you. So have you found that there is a source of income, or a field or an area that you've been in that has kind of made you feel fulfilled, or like has fulfilled you the most out of like the other things that you've been doing, if that makes any sense?
You want to go try?
Um, sure, I can try. I think for me, I think my favorite types of income are um, doing a live show, whether it's streamed or in person with a organization that I align with, be it a nonprofit theater in my town. I was really lucky to be a resident at this place called Public Theater. They were a residency at Joe's Pub, and um, like being in New York City, it, I was getting really frustrated by how predatory the scene, or just a lot of practices from different venues were towards artists. It was like, okay, you got to bring 20 people, you got to charge them all this, and then like maybe you get something at the end of the day. And I like played that game for like 10 years. Um, like put my time in um, getting hours on the stage, and then eventually it I didn't really have the energy to do that. So I started looking into institutions that don't really have to worry about their overhead so much. So like nonprofit theaters don't have to worry about the rent as much as like these small venues do. And so between that and like the grants that they can get to pay artists a fair stipend, like those are the kinds of venues that I started looking to. And the cool thing is you find you just have to get your foot in one door, and then you realize there's like a whole network of theaters or organizations that are connected to that. So it's about like really building relationships with people who are invested in paying and supporting and nurturing and developing artists, emerging artists. And that's just a great place to to start from.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that, like you were saying, both of you spoke a lot to researching, like I see these instruments in my house. Let me see if this place is hiring. Or like, I never would have thought about nonprofit organizations due to just their structure and, the resources that they're able to tap into. Because a lot of times you think, I have to have a specific, like, political kind of like, thought process, or I have to be an activist to align myself with, a company or an entity or an organization. And there are organizations that literally support the arts, and that's literally all you have to be is an artist, is yourself. And it allows for that freedom and that flexibility of actually getting paid. So huge. Love that, Treya. Shawn, were you gonna say something?
I guess to the fulfilling thing, it's been teaching. I've been very fortunate to land a couple of gigs, working especially with younger people, um, and it's been really fulfilling. It's something about, like, I remember when I met this Chinese girl who was like, she had just came from China. They spoke, like, she had to translate for her little sister, because they spoke like no English, and I remember talking to her about Yo Yo Ma one day. Could, but I guess what, no one had ever told this little girl about who this person was, and now we were teaching her American music, and I'm like, this cute, but when you go in the house, I want you to look up this Chinese scale, and I want you to play music for the elders around you and make them move. Look, tap into the culture that you have, and I don't know. I was always really cool to understand that, like, wow, like, I just told this child, about, like, ancient knowledge, basically, and here they'll be able to go into the future, hopefully knowing this a little bit more. So that's probably been the most fulfilling thing, like, that made money doing, honestly.
Yeah, teaching is a huge thing, and definitely not everybody wants to or should do this. Because it definitely is a whole
Every time they
thing.
put a kid in front of me, I always wonder, should I be here telling these children? Because I don't know, I make it. It's a fun, it's a cultural game, it's a geographical game. Like, music is one of the greatest knowledge tools that we have. And every time I'm standing in front of a group of kids, I'm like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, but it's a beautiful thing when you are, aligned with that, when that is a part of who you are, and you are able to inspire or create that spark or add to that spark that a child has and wants to learn or doesn't know that they want to learn. And it definitely is a stream of income. And there are organizations around that do just that and facilitate art experiences for the youth. So yeah, absolutely love that. And Treya, you were, oh my bad, were you gonna say something, Shawn? Oh, okay. Treya, you were saying a little earlier about like your creativity and like not like feeling boxed in and wanting to kind of spread out, and that's kind of what inspired you wanting to do multiple things at the same time. Um, with that, was that intentional? Do you kind of like think about all the things that you're good at and you're like, okay, I can do this in this field and this in this field, and look at it that way? Or is it kind of just, did it just fall into place in that way?
It was a little bit of both. I definitely spent a lot of time drawing Venn diagrams of like, what can I do? Like, what am I good at? What do I enjoy? What can I get paid for? And just trying to figure out how I want to spend my life, how I want to spend my time. And I think like there are so many ways to go about making a career for out of your art, and there's really no one right way to do it. So I think first and foremost, you have to really get clear on what your priorities are as a person, because like this is a really challenging industry to be in. And if you're not rooted in purpose, if you don't know who you are, if you don't know what you want, what your goals are, and like that's a lot of thinking to, you don't figure that out overnight. It's a process. But like I would do things like, okay, like my goals for the year, my goals for like the next 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, like lifelong goals. And I think it's just a lot of introspection, like what at the end of it all, like what kind of life do I want to live? And then you just kind of build backwards from that. And I don't know if I got away from your question, but like
No.
that's kind of where I started from. Like just like what do I want out of my life, and what are my skills, and who's going to pay me to to do all these things.
Absolutely. And I think like as we as each generation continues to try to build a life that they love, I think more resources are becoming available, and more theories around how to do that. And I recently came across something that pretty much spoke to just what you said, like backwards. What is the end goal, and then what are the mini steps, like the minuscule little bitty things that you can do to get to that goal, versus thinking like, okay, today this is what I'm doing, while also being stressed out about how am I going to get there, like doing it backwards and building that way. So absolutely great advice. Shawn, anything you want to share? Oh, sorry, you're still muted.
There we go. All right, sorry about
Gotta
that.
love it.
Yeah. Spreading out creativity. It's weird. I don't know. I've been making stuff since I was a kid. So there is no delineation between like creativity and like life. It's like ball is life. Like we're always playing basketball all the time. So like and arguably, I don't know, I've even tried to force that issue, and getting companies or jobs to understand like, no, we're not going to do this way, because this isn't how a creative person does something. Like I've tried to fancy myself as a creative consultant mostly for the last 10 years, less of an artist, less of a lot of things, but it is that consultancy. And the goal is to, what's the problem that you have and how can we solve this using a creative solution. And that's like a life philosophy, I guess.
Yeah, listen, we're although artistry um is a job, can be a job, it is also who we are, which is a crazy balance, to try to have. So absolutely, it is life. It is a life philosophy, which is also, lends itself to the business side a lot of times. Um, so I know, Shawn, you were talking about having working for IK. Where do you work again?
I work at IK Multimedia. They're down here in
Boom.
Florida.
There you go. I had the I and the K. Yes. So I guess do you find that working in working in the music industry, in that sense, having some sort of musical tech tech stuff, do you find that allows for you to still feel connected to your artistry, while also having like, the consistent 9 to 5, well, whatever the hours are, but consistent income? Do you find that is a good balance for you?
Well, welcome to the future. A lot of companies don't hire DJs or electronic music producers and give you a job. Far and few between. So every day, we get to figure it all out. Like what's the best usage of someone with my talent pool and skill sets. As a part of this company. I do think it's very important though to, I don't know, there's something about like, it's much different from me working for this company as opposed to going and working at Nintendo, which I could also go and do. And I can get a music job at Nintendo too. But I think there's something about working in a hardware capacity. I think also being a minority and a person of color is also a really important element of that, because there aren't that many companies that manufacture music instruments or music software from an African American perspective. There's a lot of Asian companies, but even in an Asian American perspective, like there really aren't a lot of companies that do this kind of work. So, it allows me to start to tap into all this and figure this all out. This is it's a new day.
Awesome. Learning as you go, figuring it out. I feel you. And Treya, and feel free to say no, I don't want to talk about it. That's totally fine too. But having worked in the hospitality industry and then going full-time artistry, and now having like a space where you're kind of not able to choose again, like would you want to get another full-time job in some random space? Would you want to get a job in an artist space or artist technology, or is the goal to complete, to continue on your full-time artistry, because you're incredible, the full-time artistry path, yeah, do you have a kind of like an idea of what speaks to you in that way?
I think I have an openness to, um, I mean, obviously, I would love to just go full out artist mode, but I'm really kind of particular about um, maintaining integrity and not really having to, um, I don't know, bow to the industry practices, and I'm not a huge fan of capitalism, so it really benefits me and my creativity to have a little bit of distance between like my creative work and income. So like if I can maintain creative control and get paid for it, like that is great. Sometimes it's not always possible. So personally, I would rather have a day job that isn't too draining, that I could work 2, 3 days a week, uh, and keep that kind of separate. Because I think there have been, and this has just been like a process to get to this place. I've quit and been like, okay, I'm gonna be an artist now, and then like found myself in like unhappy, and then you shift. So it's just it's an ongoing process, and I think like each time you just have to like take all the lessons along the way, grow from it, and like know how to set boundaries, know how to make decisions on like what kind of opportunities you say yes to. Um, Even if it's like a paid or unpaid thing, you like just have to figure out your own system of uh, navigating a really complicated system that very often I think makes it difficult for artists to just be an artist. And
Yeah.
like, I don't want to be like a social media manager, like a, I don't want to have to wear all these like hats.
Yeah.
Um, um, like, but I do what I need to do with the capacity that I have to do it in those moments. But if it really came down to it, like I would rather have a day job than a part-time day job, because it's a, you got to find a balance too. Because like when I was working 5 days a week at the hotel, that's 2 days for like laundry, music, like being a human again, and that didn't really work. So it was like, okay, now it's 4, now it's 3, now it's 2. But like the thing is, everything that you do can teach you skills that can be applied to your career. So
Yeah.
I am very much an introvert, and I like learned how to talk to people while working in restaurants.
Mm.
I made a ton of business connections in restaurants because like there's this opportunity to meet people wherever you go, and
Yeah.
yeah, so that's
Yeah, no, that was perfect. That makes total sense. And like I think that, a part of this conversation is also understanding that there's not a choice like a one story fits all, or like a one path fits all, or that you have to have one thing. So I just asked those particular things like full-time job, part-time job, whatever, just because that's kind of like what was in the conversation. But you know every person is different, and like you said, Treya, going from the lifestyle that you want to live to what leads to that. So sometimes, various career moves or career combinations um, creates that life. So it's really about figuring out the life you want to live, and what will get you there. So absolutely love that.
yeah. And I just want to add to that, like when you're starting out, especially, you're setting a foundation. So if you're agreeing to things that you don't necessarily want to do, you're only building towards a path where you're going to have to compromise. So like it's better early on to just like figure out your priorities, figure out your boundaries, and it's definitely the long and slow path. This is not like an overnight thing, but like at the end of the day, I think that like I'm going to be playing music my entire life, and so I want it to be fulfilling.
Mhm.
And that's my priority. That's not everyone's priority. So like you got to figure out what you want.
Yeah, I love that. So on to the business side. So, you know, being a musician, being an artist, have either of you set up like an LLC or S corp for, you know, your income or for your business entities?
I do have a sole proprietorship set up. Also have an LLC set up in the state of Maryland. I'm probably going to be opening up another one in the state of Florida. I've been touring for the last decade, so I get a lot of checks from other places, and you have to file taxes from those places sometimes. So it all gets kind of interesting. But then there's also the reason, an important reason why I was able to, well, I did those things a while ago. The EIDL and the PPP loans that went out last year and also this year, and of course with the pandemic, artists qualified for those if you had certain information like an LLC or an S corp set up. So, that's one of the reasons why, those things were set up. They enabled us to tap into or begin to tap into Small Business Association grants and, the other resources that the government, has here for business owners.
Yeah, that's incredible. And a great I think sometimes those things can be intimidating to artists, and you don't really know what you need, or am I doing enough to justify this move? But like you said, there are certain opportunities that present itself or that you are only eligible for if you have XYZ data or XYZ number. Um, so yeah, absolutely. How about you, Treya? If you want to share.
Yeah, I just did my taxes by the skin of my teeth uh, a couple days ago, and I'm not LLC or so I just file as an individual for now, and I think it's a plan of mine to get somebody on my team who can help organize. But like for me, that's really not my my skill set.
Yeah, I feel you. I felt the same way. And I just did my taxes, and my tax person just sent me a link. So I will share the link with you too, just to look over. I haven't looked at it yet, but apparently she said it's like really easy. So, who knows? But Shawn, I'm feeling you. I need to be on that path because there's so many things that, I don't know. And like you were saying, Treya, like it's, it's an interesting feeling, a feeling like you have to wear tons of hats. Um, Especially as an independent artist, and you're like, okay, well, I have to be my social media manager, I have to be, my accountant, I have to be, all my booking agent, all of these people. And sometimes, it takes taking that leap and just being like, look, I'm just gonna do it, and and hope for the best kind of thing. So I'm with you, Treya, on where I'm at, and then I'm hopefully going to move that way with you, Shawn, as well, with setting this up so that you can take advantage of these things. But Treya, you were talking about working with nonprofit organizations and the resources that they're able to pull from. Have you ever applied for like any artist grants or grants in general for projects or things that you were interested in doing as a source of income?
Yeah, that's kind of a newer path for me right now. I think I got my first residency in 2019, and that was with Joe's Pub, and that came with a $7,000 stipend. And I've applied, and that was like the first thing I got. And I've applied to other things. It's a little bit easier to, I think, get the smaller grants that are more like concentrated and project based. It's a whole world. So there's a lot for me to learn in that regard. I think a really helpful resource is I'm on the mailing list for Creative Capital, which they themselves have an award. It's I think it's like a $50,000 or like $100,000 potential, and it's based on like a project. And so like that's my big fish for the year. But if you're on the mailing list, they periodically send you like, okay, these are all the residencies and the grants that are due for the month of January, February. So like I'm just constantly looking at different things that I can apply to, and that in itself is a whole nother process. I had to completely, because I was just going down like a commercial music route and learning all of those things, and it's like a whole nother world that I was so furious that I didn't even know existed. Like I went to music school. I was like fortunate enough to go to music school. Never heard about a residency. Never heard about a grant um, up until like the last couple of years. And so it's like a whole nother world to explore. And especially as like a person of color, as like a queer person of color, like I don't know if it's like white guilt or like this feeling of like people, like institutions with money and resources that want to like offset or use their privilege for good. Like they will invest and create opportunities for people who are generally underrepresented. And so like for me, that was a really great way to find institutional support, um, make relationships that would lead to work, and also learn about like a whole another world. And yeah, so I'm gonna continue exploring that, and that also uh, is really interesting. For it, like satiates my curiosity for like learning about more things. So like this is an opportunity for me to work with artists across different disciplines. So like some of the grants that I've gotten, or some of the payments I've gotten, are like by composing scores for dance artists, or like making a score for a film project. And like this way I get to both explore other avenues of creativity that I want to pursue while also getting paid. And like it's a lot to learn. You gotta like figure out an artist statement, a resume, but like the more you do it, the easier it gets, I guess.
Yeah, I love that. And it the working with artists in other disciplines has always been like something of interest to me, because you know you're always like, okay, like let me I'm surrounded by musicians or whatever, and it's great to jam, um but so many other artists, you know, exist, dancers, painters, you know, people who knit, whatever the the discipline is, whatever it is that you do, it almost like lends itself to each other. Like an artist and music, like they go hand in hand. Or you know, I need art for a cover, or I need art for a CD, or whatever the case may be. So really just like networking in that way and creating business for one another um can definitely be a great thing. Shawn, have you ever applied for a grant? You're like, you got my name.
No, yes, I have applied for grants, especially all the COVID relief grants that were available for artists. Those were like super easy to obtain. A lot of them didn't have the barriers that Treya spoke on. But something which we have been trying to focus on is helping artists to understand, that these things are available to you, that and how to access these things. For example, here in the U.S., I know we have a few international users on with us. In the U.S., every state has an arts council, and that arts council then disperses the funding, which is then either donated to them or established through they apply for their own grants. And they try to fight for funding from the U.S. from the overall federal government. But that the state arts council disperses money out based on like what county you live in. So for example, Chris, the Water, and we live in Baltimore City, so we would then apply to the Baltimore City grant pool essentially. But you can also execute art like basically across your entire state. So yeah, I've applied for a few of those grants. Especially we've ramped that up over the last several months. There was a grant for like teaching like folk life or folk life art, which I got like halfway approved for. I just couldn't find a student, but it was basically like me teaching a Maryland folk life art, which in this particular case would have been DJing and club music, which is a genre specific to that particular region of the world. So I say that to let you all know that you can acquire a grant. It doesn't, you don't necessarily be like a quilter, even though I love a quilt. I love quilts. Love quilts. Quilts are an ancient technology that we should all know how to make in case it gets cold. But you don't just have to be a quilt maker. You could, like the Arts Council breaks down into film, breaks down into textiles, it breaks down into, dyeing, whatever. Look for, there's all kinds of funding out here for everything.
I love that. Oh, go ahead, Treya.
I love that you love quilts. I just needed to express that. Also, Somalia put in the chat that you can also work for organizations who create these opportunities and like look up your regional arts organization. Like start local and like do research on who's supporting artists in your area. Like I had known about Joe's Pub for a couple of years, and it took me like at least 2 tries before I got the residency, and a lot of like that was a target. I don't know if that's like the appropriate word, but that was like on my bucket list, and like it took me a couple of years to like get that opportunity. So, and a lot of that was instinctual. So just like do your research, know what's available, and then like work towards it, and that will just help continue open doors.
Love that. How do you all keep track of like your income with it coming from different sources? Do you have like a spreadsheet, some sort of budget where like you have your overall bill amount and then or responsibility amount, and then you like factor in all of the mini, shows, virtual performances, XYZ into this sheet? Or do you have another system that you use to kind of track it all?
Shawn, I'm gonna let you start this one.
So it's a combination of basically my bank account. Because these days you can sort really simply, like it'll show you exactly how much income. I was using PayPal for a while because PayPal was awesome. They used to like invoice people out of it, but it was the organization and then being able to go back and access that data. You can track, what you spent. You can create a budget if you're that kind of a person. In my case, I don't know. It's weird. Like I don't really worry about tracking the incomes. Is more like these for sure. But it's like, I don't, all the money comes into one place, but still it's like, it's just coming to one place. So, I don't necessarily have to worry about it. Now I do keep track of that though on, I do have a spreadsheet, I guess, where like I track all like the stuff I play, all the shows I do. I guess that, yeah, I do write down like what I got paid that day. Because it also helps you to create an average of, payment as well. If you played, 12 shows last year at $100 a show, I'm not good at math, so I'm not going to do this problem. But you would take that average and you would figure out what your rate is. And, in theory, you would want to increase that rate, over time. You can't just come out the house and one day be like, I want $500. No one's going to give that to you. You have to sometimes, you may start at 50. Again, you play those 50 shows. Now you're in the next year, but you learn, oh, wow, I need gas now. I had to buy this cable. So now the show rate may be $75, but you just increased your average, this that much more. So this is, I just keep paying mostly my bank account. That's how I track stuff.
Awesome. Yeah. Sure.
I keep my things in folders. So if I'm on tour, I keep all of my receipts. It kind of like Monday night doing my taxes, my room looked like a tornado hit it because I had receipts everywhere, and it's like travel expenses, food, equipment, and also I don't know if this is not tax advice. This is just what I do, but like I don't really declare shows that are under 600. I don't think you're supposed to. Or I don't know, like, and I'll also keep the invoices, the stubs of things that are higher. And for me, it's all physical, and I'm sure there are so many resources that you can look up. Like I think TurboTax or QuickBooks, there's something where you can like take a photo of the receipt and then it'll store it, and you could just do it as you go rather than doing it all at once towards the end. But yeah, for me, I have paper in envelopes and only really keep track of the big income, but I keep track of every expense.
That makes sense. And I mean, that was actually beautiful because I mean, it spoke to you too, saying your individual practices really spoke or speaks to um, everybody's personal preference. You know, like what works for me may not work for you, may not work for you. Um, so I think that as long as you're able to to do it and to know what you know what you're bringing in, um, is great. And I think that it is also really helpful that we're in tax season, or we were in tax season. I don't remember what the cut off date was, um, because that is a huge thing, being an artist and knowing, you know, what you need to claim. If you're doing your taxes yourself, if you're getting someone else to do your taxes for you. So being an individual, did you feel equipped when doing your taxes, like that you had all the information that you needed to get that done with, you know, all of the different streams of income that you had coming in?
Yeah, and part of it was also uh, because income or like money is not a huge priority for me. I need it to survive, but beyond that, um, like I find wealth to come in other ways. Um, so I made a choice to lower my overhead. And
Mm.
that means that like for the last 3 years, up until the pandemic hit, I was crashing on couches. I didn't have rent to pay. Like, I don't have a car. I live in New York. Like, if I went on tour, I would rent a car. Um, and like, pretty much didn't really have a lot of expenses. So that choice made it possible to make the decisions that I made. And that's not for everyone. And that was a really challenging time as well. Like I've been grounded. I've like had a home for the last couple months, and that's like a whole nother way of living. And now it's like, okay, I'm like setting up my routines and my practices, and like getting organized to be more a better steward of and like build a better monthly, yearly budget. But
Yeah,
it's a learning. It's in progress.
absolutely. As it always is, you know. Give yourself grace, everybody. You know, everything is a process and a learning process. So, absolutely, honor your journey, Treya. Sean, how about you? Did you feel prepared with like the documents that you needed, or with your everything coming through your bank account? I know, like with the app that I have, you can like pull it up and see what category things fall under. So did you feel equipped when it came to I guess claiming things as income from various sources?
Yeah, they make it pretty simple to follow along. Where it got a little interesting was trying to figure out, like certain grants or like, donations or things like that, like how do those factor in? But for the most part, it is a pretty cut and dry system. I personally would just recommend getting an accountant. That's their job. Their job is to sit there and
Get you
crunch the
straight.
thingy, the visor hat with the green thing, get an accountant
The
and let them
little
take care of all this important stuff. But at the end of the day, that is another person that you on your staff that you have to make sure gets compensated appropriately. And, you have to make sure that you can trust that person as well. There have been countless musicians and artists who have had way more money than I'm sure any of us have, taken from them due to improper management. So that's very important to always keep in mind. You are showing yourself to people in a slightly different fashion. But all the information was pretty easily to access these days.
Awesome. And Sean, when you were saying that, like you have a separate spreadsheet that has like the gigs that you've played and the amount that you were paid, have you ever had a moment where you know, played a gig and you're having to reach out to the space or the entity to like pay you? They haven't paid you yet. And by having that spreadsheet, you know all the gigs that you played and which ones, you know, haven't submitted payment. Have you had to reach out, and if so, do you have any advice for artists having to, you know, pressure, or not pressure, but you know, uh converse with folks about sending them payment?
I have not had that issue. It's almost like essentially I don't come out of my house unless I've already got paid.
Mm.
So that's a part of it. Sometimes there's also a contract involved, you know, which will also ensure that, you know, you all agreed to give me this money. You know, this wasn't my, you know, you all signed this piece of paper. But I also tried to negotiate at least 50% up front, and then I get the other 50% when I finish playing. But 9 times out of 10 these days, no, if you expect to see us show up, you paid us already. Otherwise, why am I here?
Love that. Do you have a similar structure, Treya, on like, you know, contract
Definitely
upfront?
for the bigger things, contract for sure. Sometimes deposit up front. But for the most part, I'm more, I think, of a quality over quantity in my approach. Like I don't play that many shows, but I will every so often just do big shows. It took me time to get here, but so I'm kind of at a point where like the people that I'm doing shows with are like reputable and like are already aligned in so many other ways that I don't have to, like, I'm not working with shiesty folks. Like
Yeah.
I don't I know that I'm not going to need to track you down, but like I'll have a contract just in case I need to.
I love that. Yeah, awesome. And all of you wonderful people tuning in, you know, like Sean said, like Treya said, contracts are wonderful, and there are like things on the internet now that can like draft up something simple. Or depending on who you're working with, you know, they may already have a contract, but getting that in writing, what is going to be paid, is super, super important. And also, you know, not leaving the venue or having it, you know, set up front where I either get 50% ahead of time and the rest of it, you know, right before I play or right after I play, so that you don't have to run into any having to chase down folks, and just setting that clear expectation that this is what's going to happen, so that when I'm done my show and I come up to you, the envelope should be ready, or the PayPal or Cash App should already be on the way, to avoid that and allow you to continue to be in your artistic realm for real.
I
Um,
actually, not to, I
no,
actually
no,
got
go
away
ahead.
from playing larger shows because of there's a wait. You know, when you start playing like large festivals, you're not getting paid that night. You're getting paid 3 months to 6 months later. You know, after much larger artists, you know, then you maybe have been compensated. And you know, that was something which I started taking into account in terms of like figuring out, okay, well, if these are the shows that I'm going to be playing now, that means that shows I played in the wintertime are paying for my spring rent. You know, shows I play in the spring are paying my summer rent. Summer shows are paying my fall rent. You know, you end up having to start to work further out in advance. Then you start to get into conversations about, well, could you even book the space? You know, when you were looking for, you know, to be able to set all that up. But you know, a lot of the larger festivals that I've been able to fortunately DJ at, they did not pay us that day. It was months.
Wow, yeah, that's great to know. I know Somalia in the chat is saying they didn't know that either. So definitely something to consider, and speaks to, you know, having to forward plan about, you know, the income that you'll need and what shows you need to play in order to get that covered. So we're wrapping up almost. So before we go, do you have any like last advice for artists looking to diversify their income, looking to create multiple streams of income? Like one last hurrah for the artist.
It would probably be to think outside of the box. And when I say that, I mean to say is that if you're looking to, like, for example, I know a young man who makes guitars. He's an amazing guitar player, and he also can teach you someone how to play guitar. That's 3 different streams of income with the same instrument, you know, and that circle can spiral further outward. So try to truly invest oneself as much as you possibly can, because essentially it's like, while it may seem like this delta at the end of your river, it's actually going out into the ocean that is you, and that's where all your income comes in from. So very important to keep that in mind.
Absolutely. Realize on what you do well, what you enjoy doing, and figure out all the ways you can bring in income from that thing. Treya, you were gonna.
Yeah, I would just say know who you are, know what you are worth. And if you don't know what you're worth, you can always look up, like, what do XYZ get paid? Because, like, sometimes people are like, oh, like, I've got a budget, or what's your budget? I'm like, okay, well, what is this gig that I'm doing, and like, what do people typically get paid for? So if you don't know, look it up. And it's better to ask for more. Don't sell yourself short. And develop really strong relationships with people who will invest in you. And that could be like fellow artists, that could be people from institutions. Like, I've gotten a lot of work, and I've gotten a lot of work from, like, my friends too. It's just like in hospitality, we talked about, like, this rotating $20 bill. Like, you get off work and then you go to, like, a bar or whatever, and you tip 20, and that $20 just keeps cycling, because it's like, it's just love. You share, it's abundance. And like, if you can't do a gig, also know your capacity. Sorry, there's like so many things. uh know your capacity. If you can't take something, don't just take it because it pays. Or, like, put your friend on, it'll come back. Because when your friend can't do a gig, they'll send it to you. And, like, I think just approaching, it's difficult to navigate capitalism with abundance, and not with scarcity. But, like, if you can shift your mindset and your perspective, like, you will call things to you. So don't operate out of fear. And, like, just, at the end of the day, it's really about making the best possible work as an artist that you can do. So, like, everything needs to honor and to serve that purpose.
Love that. Abundance. Yes. Authenticity. Love that. Yes, 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 Ashe. Somalia, listen. We're about to be friends. Um so thank you both. Thank you, Treya. Thank you, Shawn. This has been an incredible conversation. Thank you for all the insight and transparency um that you have shared with us all. Truly, truly appreciate your time and your energy. This has been incredible. To all of y'all who tuned in, thank you, thank you, thank you for the questions that you sent in. Thank you for jumping in the chat, letting us know where you're tuning in from. Got UK, Nashville, Cali, Minneapolis, Seattle. We got some really, really incredible folks in here. So again, check out your local arts organizations, your local arts councils, to see if there's any grants that you can apply for, to see who's supporting the artists in your area. And check out Treya's music. Check out Shawn. We will send out an email after this webinar on Monday with the recording and with links to connect with these incredible creatives. And tune in to the next In Session. I am Kristen, aka Like Water. It has been my absolute pleasure, and this has been In Session.